everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm doing a 2-in-1 wrap-up, so June and July being wrapped up today. Over the summer months I was just extremely busy with school and I wanted to do well. So I did not film nor participate in as many readathons as I wanted to this summer, but I'm hoping that the next summer months will be a little less hectic. Starting us off in our wrap-up is Horror Story by Grady Hendrix. This is a comedy/horror with the first part being comedy and then the second half being horror. We have an IKEA-like store called Orsk that is haunted. One of the employees named Amy really just wants to be able to pay her rent and buy groceries. She gets roped into doing a nighttime shift in the store because the supervisor thinks that there's someone coming in and messing things up throughout the night, and they haven't been able to catch this person. So Amy gets roped in with the promise of making a little bit more money so that she can, afford rent and groceries. Unfortunately, it is not just random people coming into the store messing it up, it's a whole bunch of ghosts, and Amy and her coworkers have to figure out a way to escape. Overall, I really like this book. I thought the transition from comedy in the beginning to horror towards the end was really smooth and I liked it a lot. I also thought there was a lot more character development than I was expecting. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, but I thought it was done really, really well. I'm really glad that I like Grady Hendrix's books because I have 3 others and this is the first one I read of his. So I'm really glad that I like his writing style because otherwise that would have been not great. The second book that I read was The Accidental Kiss by Heather Lee Bell. This is a romantic comedy-esque with a friends to lovers trope. We have Charlie, who's a chef who tends to travel a lot, and she's kind of in love, and by I mean kind of really in love with her best friend Dylan, who's a firefighter. Now, in their town, there's a legend that if you kiss on a certain day at sunset, then that means you are soulmates. Charlie believes in this, Dylan doesn't. So it's primarily about them getting together and this kind of urban legend in their town. It's a quick, fun read. I was actually more interested in the side characters than the main characters, especially with Charlie's sister who is pregnant and they're trying to find out who the father is throughout the whole book. I was kind of more interested in that. Otherwise, it's really fun. It's a light read, so it was really quick. The next book I read is Descendant of the Crane by Joan He, and this is a young adult fantasy court intrigue novel. I love court intrigue, and this follows Princess Hasina, who, after her father dies, maintains that he was murdered, and so she goes to the courts and says, hey, we need to have a trial. During this trial and subsequent events, we find out a lot of stuff that happens in the background of this kingdom. Overall, I thought this was a pretty fun read. I generally like my court intrigue novels to be less action-packed, which sounds really weird. So in the first half of this book, you get more of the trial basis, and then past the second half, you get more action-based stuff happening. A lot more fast-paced scenes. This is not a bad thing at all. It just isn't really to my taste. When I read about court intrigue, I actually like really slow-paced novels when it comes to that kind of thing. If you haven't read any court intrigue fantasy novels, I think this is a really good place to start. The next book is Darcy's Inheritance by Linda Ford. This is a Christian romance, and I don't typically read Christian romances. They're just not really my jive. But I read this one because I got it out of a mystery grab bag from Tidal Wave, and I'm trying to read those instead of just not reading them. So this book is about a gal named Darcy who inherits a house from her father who she's estranged from. Now, she also finds out that she has a 6-year-old sister named Amy. Now, Amy lives with Blake. Blake is Amy's brother. He is Darcy's father's wife's son. And I'll get to that in a minute because I bet that's sinking in for a few people, but we'll get there. Well, anyway, this book follows Darcy as she gets to know her sister well and as she and Blake start a relationship. And also it covers aspects of forgiveness and, whether to forgive someone who has done you wrong and who wasn't there for you. Now, going back to Blake and Darcy's relationship, I do find it a little bit funny because the word step-siblings never comes up in this book. But essentially, that is what Darcy and Blake are. Darcy's father married Blake's mother. They're not blood related, but by marriage, that's there. But step-sibling just isn't in this book. Amy asks Blake how Blake and Darcy are related to each other, or if they're brother and sister, and they're like, no, we're not. And so step-siblings just doesn't come into it. I do find that funny, and I do understand that Blake and Darcy don't know each other in that way. They just met at the beginning of the will reading for Darcy's father, so they don't see each other as step-siblings because they just didn't grow up like that. But, scandal. This is a very non-spicy book, by the way. There's not any love scenes. This book features primarily around forgiveness, mainly Darcy forgiving her father. I kind of didn't like the forgiveness aspect of this book, mainly because it seems like it was all upon Darcy to figure out the forgiveness piece. And the way that they tied that up was a little bit messy for me. Darcy's father just didn't really keep into contact in Darcy's life, and they make the reason for that is because Darcy's mom moved around a lot. But there's still some questions that I would have, that I would find trouble with if I was Darcy. And then also there's the fact that Blake kept telling Darcy, well, you should have visited and all this kind of stuff. Darcy was a child when her father left. So unfortunately, I was a little bit disappointed with this book and its themes. The next book I read is Founding Mothers by Cokie Roberts. I buddy read this with Arion from Book Zealots. Thank you so much for buddy reading this with me. I thought it was a lot of fun. I admit I don't know a lot about the Revolutionary War or the Founding Fathers, and so with this book, The Founding Mothers, I do see it as more of supplemental reading. So if you do know a lot about that time period, I think you'll find more value in this book. Not to say that I didn't learn anything, I did, and I did find value in it, but admittedly, if you're going to go into this book, I would know more about the Founding Fathers than probably what I did, which was very, very, very tiny amount. The next book is Devil's Daughter by Lisa Claypass. This is the 5th book in the Ravenel series, and it is West Ravenel's book. Admittedly, the first Ravenel book, which I will link the review in the description, because I wasn't the biggest fan. Like, it was okay. Wasn't the biggest fan, though. Lisa Claypass has hooked me into the series more and more. It just gets better. I really liked West Ravenel's story. He ends up falling for a gal named Phoebe, who is the daughter of another character from another series called the Wallflower series. Sebastian St. Vincent is his name, and that's his daughter who West falls in love with. West was the bully of Phoebe's late husband back when they were in primary school, so Phoebe doesn't like West. But then she gets to know West. And they end up having to figure out how to make it work between them because it's just not very practical for them to get together. Not that there's big obstacles for them getting together. It's just not the most practical thing for Phoebe. I love this book. West Ravenel was one of my favorite characters since the beginning. And the fact that we got to see him grow as a character through the other books. And then he gets his own book. Huzzah. The next book I read is Beguiling the Beauty by Sherry Thomas. This follows a character named Venetia, and it takes place in like kind of late Regency times where technology is starting to get more of a stronghold, but they still have like arranged marriages and seasons that come up. Venetia is a baroness, and she's a widow. She actually had 2 marriages prior. Venetia ends up going on a tour to the Americas with her sister-in-law and her sister because her sister has a little bit of a scandal going on back home. Well, Venetia and her sisters decide to go to this university where the Duke of Lexington, named Christian, is doing a speech. I forget what it's a lecture on, but he's doing a lecture. So they go and see him doing this lecture, and he ends up talking about Venetia without naming her, but pretty much insinuating that she killed her former husbands. And the reason why he does this is because he just wants to talk bad because he likes her so much. It's a weird reasoning. You'll have to read the book. I actually enjoyed this book a lot. He ends up talking crud about Venetia. Venetia wants to get back at him and be like, I will make him fall in love with me and then I'll leave him. And Venetia does just that. They get on a boat. Venetia goes in disguise, like she has this veil, and she never takes the veil off around Christian. And she ends up making him think that she's this German baroness lady. I don't even know if it's a baroness, but she makes him think that she's this German lady as they ride on this boat, and he falls in love with her, and then she actually falls in love with him while they're on the boat, and it goes from there. Reading the synopsis, I did not think I would like this book nearly as much, but I admit I had a very particular enjoyment of the mess that these characters made of themselves. Beguiling the Beauty, by the way, is the first in the Fitzhughes trilogy, and the next book that I read is the second book, which is Ravishing the Heiress. I did a whole reviewing romance of this book, so if you want to view that, I will link it down in the description. All I'm going to really say about it is that it's an arranged marriage plot and friends to lovers. So we have Fitz and Millie. They are arranged marriage in the beginning. They end up making this deal that they're not going to sleep with each other until 8 years so that they can have 8 years of freedom until they consummate their marriage. And in that 8 years, they fall for each other. I really like this book a lot. Probably too much. The next book I read was Chasing Cassandra by Lisa Claypass. This is the 6th book in the Ravenel series, and it follows Cassandra, Ravenel, and also Tom Severin. Cassandra is just trying to find a husband, someone she likes, someone she gets along with. She's going to her season. She, dances with people, flirts. Tom Severin is a train mogul. He's very rich, and he sees Cassandra, and he falls in love right away. Cassandra thinks he's interesting. There ends up being a scandal, and Tom comes to save the day for Cassandra. So that's really what this book is about. As said, when the Ravenel series first started, I didn't really like it as much, but I'm loving all the books that are coming out. Devil's Daughter is still my favorite, but Chasing Cassandra was actually really good. There's a lot of parts that I liked, including when Tom and Cassandra go into negotiations about their marriage. It's actually a really fun book. If you like historical romance, I actually heavily suggest the Ravenel series. Just know that the first, 2 books of Cold Hearted Rake and Marrying Mr. Winterbourne, I found that you have to kind of get through. They're not bad in any means, and they're still entertaining, but I think past that is a lot more engaging romances. The next book I read is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This book follows a character named Anna Fox, who is a child psychologist who also has agoraphobia. So she is afraid to go outside. She doesn't want to ever leave her house, and she has found remarkable ways around this. Now, the problem is that Anna has a tendency to look at her neighbors a lot and kind of spy on them, and she ends up seeing a crime happen at one of her neighbor's house, and it kind of just follows that train, and whether that crime really happened or not, whether Anna truly saw something happen, or whether it is because of hallucinations that she may be happening because of her meds and the fact that she drinks a lot. And when you mix the kind of medication she's on with alcohol, you can get some delusions and hallucinations. This is a really good book. I haven't read a lot of psychological thrillers. This book makes me want to read more of them. I thought that the presentation of agoraphobia was actually pretty well done, just because Anna is not the only person that you see with agoraphobia in this book. And by see, I mean like mentioned. Anna uses this website called Agora, and she talks to other people who have agoraphobia, and so she talks about different reasons why people are on that site and different reasons why it happens. Anna also using her psychology experience to kind of help people get through that. So I thought that was a really neat take on something that could have been really bad to showcase. I feel like sometimes when mental illness is viewed, it's viewed in such a horrid way of harm towards other people, and that's normally not the case. And in this case, I thought that it was actually balanced pretty well. I actually felt like Anna was a really good 3-dimensional character. And those are the books that I read for June and July. Have you read any of these books? What did you think about them? Are there any books that you think I would like based on the books that I talked about? By all means, please leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for sticking by me, and as always and forever, may get lost